if the person that you're mentoring or coaching isn't going to take accountability or responsibility for, one, their actions, and two, taking the step forward to try to improve, I think you do get to a point. I mean, and of course, you have to go through like your personal development plans, things like that, take it a step further. But yeah, I think if you have somebody who isn't highly engaged or wants to learn, you do unfortunately sometimes have to cut your losses. And I've been in that position too, where, I've had to have those courageous conversations. We'll call them
I
that.
love that.
Firm and friendly
I love that.
conversations.
Leading Ain't Easy, the show that cuts through the noise and gets real about leadership. I'm Ryan Calkins, Marine Corps veteran and founder of Reframe and Rise, and I'm here with my good friend and fellow leader, Ernie Epley, founder of Bus Pro Network, as we unpack the highs, lows, and hard-earned lessons of what it actually takes to lead with character in today's world. It's not another highlight reel or fluffy leadership pep talk. We're talking about the stuff most people don't, the doubt, the pressure, the people problems, the pivots, and the personal growth that it demands. Because the truth is, leadership looks good on paper, but in real life, leading ain't easy.
Hey, welcome back to Leading Ain't Easy. Our episode today is focusing on coaching as a leadership skill, and we have a guest with us today, Alicia Sanders, who is a very dear friend of mine for many, many years now. Not that we're old or anything, but you know how it is.
Yeah. Welcome,
But
Alicia.
yeah, I just want to
Thanks.
give you a chance to introduce yourself real quick, a little bit about your background, not, an extensive bio, but
The 30-second elevator pitch, as they call it.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So my name is Alicia Sanders, as Ryan mentioned. We've known each other for years. I am actually a director of supply chain management. My focus is in hospital logistics mainly, but ultimately coaching individuals to work autonomously, and work through various nuances, I guess you could say, that hospitals can bring forth in the realm of supply chain and logistics.
That's great. And I mean, honestly, most leaders are coaching whether they realize it or not, and I didn't, I guess the question is whether it's intentional or accidental. And I think when you start to learn to use coaching as a tool, it becomes much more effective and productive to getting everything done.
Absolutely. I think one of the first things that I learned when I was, I want to say, voluntold, hey, it's time for you to put on your big girl pants and start coaching folks. One of the things that really resonated with me was there's actually a difference between managing and coaching. And I think a lot of folks lose sight on that. And one of the big things that I learned in my first year of being a leader was that managing is more about directing tasks, but when you're trying to coach, you're ultimately trying to develop folks so that you don't have to give them those small directives of, hey, you should do this, hey, critically think about that. So that was one of the first big things that I learned as I started my leadership journey. And the other thing that I learned, again, managing and coaching are completely different things. I don't think they're the same at all. I think that when it comes to being a manager, managers can create compliance. But when you think about managing in the coaching aspects, you're creating that compatibility, right? So it's not about telling people what to do. It's essentially trying to coach them through clarity and expectations and setting those standards so that folks essentially have a roadmap on what it takes to do the right thing. And then you can kind of guide them along the way as they start to develop.
So it's about being more deliberate and intentional rather than either overly directive or, more hands off.
Correct. I think a lot of managers tend to assume they think they know what's best for their individuals. But at the end of the day, what I've learned is you really need to understand that each person that you're coaching you can't take the same approach for every person that you coach. I think it's important to ask those curious questions. I think that helps you understand, one, the personality and the person that you're working with, but two, it gives you insight as to how you can better develop them. And you can make those tweaks and kind of put your own flavor in on it. But at the end of the day, I think it's very important to ask those questions. So, if you have, I'm trying to think of an example. So if you are so used to asking, hey, let's say that you had somebody who you directed a task and it didn't get done to your standard. Instead of saying, well, why didn't you do it this way? If you ask those curious questions, I think it really helps the folks that are in the position of trying to develop themselves start really thinking outside the box of, well, why did I do that? What could I have done better? And I think that really helps them kind of see their path forward. And as a coach, you're just kind of there to, nudge them off the edge when it's time.
And building on the point you made with your opening is that my experience with being a director of a highly logistical department, I feel like there's a lot of through lines with our jobs. I'm sure if we just sat down and talked about our day to day, we would have a lot of the same aches and pains. One thing that I continue to try and build on, because I don't think I'm ever fully evolved. I always want to be in that constant state of learning and constant state of becoming better and better and greater to try and do a better job, essentially. One thing that I have had challenge with is looking at a job and seeing that it needs to be done and just for the sake of putting this fire out, let's say, I'm just going to go in there and do it. Right. Instead of saying, hey, why don't I draw from this coaching well to empower my team so that the machine is more well oiled. So I guess where I'm going with this is I always like trying to ask either Ryan or our guests, like, what are some tools that we can maybe offer our audience, people who might be in this position, whether they're mid-level management or upper management, or even just controlling a small subgroup as a lead. What are some of the tools to try and strike that balance between coaching versus, hey, we just got to get this job done because of a deadline, right?
Right.
I'd imagine in your experience and my experience is the same. Like, that's a very delicate issue because we're answering to folks who ultimately aren't part of our day-to-day, so they're more detached, so they just want to see the job done. However, we're trying to strike a balance of empowering our team with coaching versus I got a deadline to meet.
Sure. Sure. Oh, go ahead,
No,
Ryan.
I was just gonna say that Alicia mentioned before, a lot of managers go in and they're quick to solve the problem, and the idea really behind coaching is that you're trying to get people to improve their thinking rather than solving the issues for them. And as a certified coach, one thing I had to really shift away from was being able giving that advice too quickly and serving more as a mentor than a coach. And really in professional coaching, the whole point is it operates under the assumption that the person is capable and that you don't have to be there to give guidance or rescue or step in and do other things. It's that you treat people as they're capable. You operate under the assumption that they're capable. And I think a lot of times leaders, especially those in managerial positions, forget about that in the course of work, just because, most of the time you're constantly putting out fires. So your instinct is, okay, I need to get this done and get to the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as a coach, it's also important to, again, if we've got, major timelines and we've got, fires here left and right, I think it's really important as a coach to really focus on fixing, right? So what I mean by that is real development really comes back to acknowledging your teammates' strengths as opposed to their weaknesses. I feel like sometimes managers will just, hey, you did this wrong. Hey, do this better. Hey, do that better. But I feel like as a coach, you have to empower your people. And one of the best ways to do that I've experienced through coaching is to really focus on the strengths first. It's kind of like that compliment sandwich, right? Like, hey, I know we're under a deadline. Hey, great job, being proactive as opposed to reactive in this situation. Going forward, what are some lessons that we learned that we can take and kind of fine tune that approach should it happen in the future. I think that's important. And I think the other thing that a lot of coaches really need is a roadmap. And what I mean by that in the professional realm, uh, in the realm that I work in, we call them standard operating procedures, right? So if everybody has a basic roadmap to understand, X, Y, and Z, they can kind of get it started. But then you as a coach kind of come in and you help fine tune those strengths and really hone in and really get them to understand that there can be lessons learned with this. You can grow, right? And I think a lot of managers also lose the fact that being emotionally intelligent when you're coaching people is vital, right? So
Yeah.
if you're just stoic and hey, and you don't have that come talk to me if you have questions, right? I feel like a coach just needs to be their door needs to be open 24/7, right? Because you might have somebody who's doing well, right? But maybe they get stuck. If you don't have that welcoming, hey, come ask me, how do you know that they're developing beyond that point, right? You kind of assume, and then that gets back into the coaches can never assume, right? We need to know that our folks are walking the path forward that we want them to walk.
One thing I want to kind of hammer home a little bit is the point you made about um, boosting the positive and trying to find a way to improve the not so positive in a manner that is emotionally intelligent. One of the things that I appreciate when it's done by the leaders I follow is, and I've picked this up from them, is boosting that confidence, right? But giving your team the chance to come up with the solution on their own. So in your scenario you gave, you're like, hey, we did really well here. We knocked it out of the park here. One of the things that I've found that's been very successful in is then turning that to where instead of saying, hey, what the F is going on here, turning that to say, hey, we might not have met all of our goals here. So what are some of the things where I can help you meet that goal? And what are some of the things where you feel like you would be more successful if you had XYZ or whatever the tool is. So not only you're not negatively communicating with them, you are positively reinforcing their good behavior. Well, I say good behavior, their good action, right? And then trying to source that to them, because maybe I have a suggestion, but I'm not boots on the ground, right? There's 3 degrees of separation between the boots on the ground in my operation and me. So maybe they're seeing something that I don't see, and maybe a factor that I'm not considering all of a sudden comes to light, and they might be at their wits' end with it. But hey, I've ran into that situation before. That's an easy fix, right? And so not only am I achieving team buy-in with that approach of emotional intelligence, I'm also maybe discovering and rearming my tool, retooling my guys out there, my girls out there, the team out there, to then boost production or whatever the case might be. But you're still doing that in a very coachable way, in a very positive way. It's easy to be negative, right? It's easy to come in with a, man, what the hell, right? And I do have those moments behind behind closed doors, but and that's another challenge again. This show is a real eye opener. I get really introspective and think like, man, I need to not show that in front of the team more. I need to be more again communicating in a sense with emotional intelligence. So again, excellent point. I just want to build on that a bit.
Well, adding on to what you said, it's also I think the biggest mind shift in coaching is realizing that your job isn't to be helpful. So obviously you don't want to be negative, but you don't want to be overly agreeable or there. What I mean by helpful is obviously you want to help the person, but your goal isn't to help, it's to be effective, and it's to help people understand what they need to get there and put them in positions to succeed.
Yeah,
So
and I believe
oh, go ahead.
no,
No,
I
I was
was
gonna ask another question. Go ahead.
yeah, go for it. Ask away.
I was gonna shift gears, so go ahead and we could close out with your point.
Yeah, the last point, I believe one of you mentioned earlier, mentorship, right? That is huge. If coaches are put in a position to where they can mentor their employees to get to where they need to be, I think that's solid. And then the other thing that I have learned as a coach that does prove successful when you're trying to develop employees, yeah, I do daily we call them daily huddles, just daily check-ins. Hey, let's talk about Monday. What are your big goals for today? What are your barriers? What can I do to support you? Things like that. And I feel like when you have those check-ins with the folks that you're trying to develop, nothing too serious, 5-minute huddle, right? Huddle, drink your coffee, get on about your day. But that really sets them up for success because it gets them in the mindset of saying, all right, I've got clear tasks and milestones I need to complete. I have the support of my coach should I need it. However, as we continue to do these daily huddles, what I've noticed, the shift that I've seen in the PMs that work in my camp is they just feel a bit more empowered. Like, hey, somebody is watching my back and somebody is empowering me to go out there and do my best. And those daily check-ins have been invaluable to us.
So
And in the
as a mentor and coach, there is a difference, right? So a mentor is an expert that gives advice, and their purpose is to share their expertise and knowledge and wisdom and everything else, where a coach is trying to pull it out of the person. So for some, you may just be a mentor, for others you may just be a coach, but most of the time you're kind of going back and forth between being that mentor to somebody, but also stepping out and putting them in a position to where it's like, okay, well, I've shared what I can. This is for you to step up. Let me see what you have, and I'll hold you accountable.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to understand that you have employees in different tiers. And as you're coaching or mentoring, really understanding what that skill set is and encouraging them to take the next step. So if I have a
hmm
senior manager who can do everything, all right, we're going to focus on you, essentially delegating, doing other things that push you in the right path forward. But if I have somebody who's brand new, right, a little bit different. So I think as a coach, you just have to understand, again, the skill set of the folks as they're going along the way. And that will really give you, you know, what you need essentially, right?
So what do you guys think leaders get wrong about coaching?
I
what are leaders
think
get? Okay.
I think there's always this assumption that what I say, what I'm trying to coach you on, resonates with you. I think there's that assumption. I think coaches could do a better job of reiterating and making sure that the person that you're coaching understands what you're trying to coach them on, essentially, right? I don't think coaches should ever assume that the person understands what's going on. I think they need to validate that.
I think it's
We all
awesome
know what
because
assuming does, right?
yeah, right. I was actually, that was what kind of the path I was going to go on, was the same thing, was with communication, assuming that our communication is received. I forget which leadership book this is in, but one of the key points was communicating with intent and speaking not to be heard, but speaking to be understood. A common example I give is folks on my team. A lot of our operations are dependent and linked directly with other departments who we are sort of handcuffed until we get data from them, or whatever we need to keep going. So many times when I'm looking for, okay, where did this bottleneck, what stopped this, I'm doing my investigation, and I look and say, oh, we didn't get the information from the other department. It's easy to just to as a leader to do this, and I'm very caution not to do this, but start pointing fingers at other departments whenever, because then that just that leads to its whole own mess of problems. But then kind of reinforcing a positive behavior within our staff to say, hey, look, I know you sent that email. I know that you made that that call and left that voicemail. We need to then boost our communications from our end so that we're communicating in a manner that does receive the intended target, and it does get a response. And it doesn't, sometimes you are going to have to send that email twice. You're going to have to ping them, once a day until you get something, because our operations are a standstill. So again, it's easy to say, oh, I sent the email, I left the voicemail, and walk away. And then all of a sudden we're bottlenecked here. That doesn't help anybody. Communicating with intent to be heard, and communicating with, over communicating and oversharing, and communicating in a manner that isn't demanding, but just more of a, hey, I really need this information. We are at a standstill until we get this. I understand you have your whole own set of problems over there with that in that department. However, if at your earliest convenience, get this to us. And you would be surprised. That seems on the surface like, oh yeah, that's common sense, but man, it's not it that kind of I feel like that's the number one area where honestly where I coach our team is communicating and then communicating with intent and communicating with intent to be understood.
So you sound a little frustrated, or like it's bringing up some old wounds. So how do you coach when you're frustrated or disappointed?
That's a that I saw that in the show notes, and I wanted to present a scenario with that because it's kind of two pronged. I'm in a situation where I Ryan knows me on a personal level. I very much am hey, in this industry that I'm in particular, the school bus industry, in this state, it is a industry where I don't have a competitive approach. I don't have an approach of, oh, there's only this one director gig. I gotta, you know, elbow these people down to make sure they see me to no, this is a full table, plenty of food. I have the approach of everybody can eat. There's so much work out there for everybody to do. I want to see everybody succeed because the more drivers I have on the road, the more drivers ABC Unified next to me has on the road, the more beneficial it is, the more chance it gives our future. Not to get on a soapbox here, but education is key. And if they can't get to these programs, you could have the best programs, the best award-winning curriculum, but if you can't get kids there, then what good is that education, right? So it's in a broad sense, that's why I carry this sort of mentality in my industry saying, hey, everybody come eat. So for to that point, I want to see people succeed. I want to see people become state certified school bus instructors. I want to see them rise up through the ranks and whether that's at the organization I'm part of, or if you're part of my organization and there's an opportunity out there, by all means, nobody is married to one school district or one educational facility. Like, go where your opportunity is. So in that, I have a lot of folks who I'm both coaching and mentoring at the same time, who are part of, who have been part of my organization or are currently part of my organization. So the coaching while frustrated part is, at what point, and this is going to sound heartless, but at one point do you say, I got to walk away? If you are offended with every bit of feedback I have, and as positive as I could frame it, right? It's still, there's no accountability there on that end. You can't grow until you say, oh, I screwed up here. I tell people all the time, like, the number one thing that managers say is, oh, I messed up. How do I get better? That's the only way you grow, is making the mistakes, not making intentional mistakes, or malicious mistakes, but in that area. How are you going to grow until you realize where you went wrong? Coaching somebody like that, mentoring somebody, right, who seems to have the inability to grow beyond that point. Is there a cutoff? Is there a time where you're like, look, I just got to cut my losses and run? As heartless as that may seem, is there a point that gets to, or do we keep trying?
That is a great question. In the realm that I work in, so again, I'm in hospital supply chain management, critical, high stress environments.
Yeah.
We use the term drinking from the fire hose when it comes to, things that may
Yes.
be going on. And what I will say, you hit the nail on the head. It goes back to accountability. So, we can talk about lessons learned all day. We can talk about, hey, this is where we went wrong. What will be your next steps forward? But if the person that you're mentoring or coaching isn't going to take accountability or responsibility for, one, their actions, and two, taking the step forward to try to improve, I think you do get to a point. I mean, and of course, you have to go through like your personal development plans, things like that, take it a step further. But yeah, I think if you have somebody who isn't highly engaged or wants to learn, you do unfortunately sometimes have to cut your losses. And I've been in that position too, where, I've had to have those courageous conversations. We'll call them
I
that.
love that.
Firm and friendly
I love that.
conversations. Friendly
Yeah.
conversations about, "Hey, you know, I have tried to coach you. What can I do better?" Right? Because that's where it always goes. Like, what can I do better as a coach to coach the person who is struggling right now? And at the end of the day, everybody needs to ask themselves that question, even as the person being coached. Like, what am I doing wrong? What can I do better? If I'm
Yes.
forgetting things, maybe I should listen to my coach. Maybe I should bring a notebook. If my coach is telling me, "Hey, that's great that you emailed that person twice. Maybe go knock on their door." Like, think of creative ways to get better. But at the end of the day, you can lead the horse to water. If they don't drink the water, what do you do?
Yeah. Yeah. I hearing you talk about that, and I feel like we may share something here. It's like I pour a lot of my heart and soul into this job, and a lot of my emotional investment is in people as a leader, as I think it should as a leader. So whenever I'm to this point, I'll be honest, but whenever you're here, there's something about that is not to just bitch and moan all here, but it sucks because it's sad. I feel like, man, there's so much potential here. I can want it for you all day long, but until you pick up the cross and bear it, like there's nothing any of us can do. So yeah, I'll just end on that.
Yeah, and I think one thing that coaches need to be aware of is, in your high stress environments, complacency does happen, right? Sometimes folks
Mm,
are highly engaged and sometimes they fall off. And as a coach, you just have to, again, your folks, your individuals have different styles of, personalities, things like that. And it's very important to, hey, you were highly engaged a month ago, what's going on, right? Because again, going back to the coaching, you have to ask those curious questions. Because if you just, oh, this person's not doing their job, let's not assume that. Let's find out the reasons why to see if we can coach them to get back to where they're not complacent. They are fully engaged and want to do the right thing 100% of the time.
Well, that's the whole thing is somebody's willingness to be coached. So in professional coaching, it's obviously client led. So a client has to want to be coached to begin with. But when you're looking at leader coaching, you're not just coaching, the person. It's you also have to balance that with performance and outcomes and the organization and all of these competing priorities where you don't have endless time to give to one person who isn't, like you said, engaged or accepting of not even direction, but just wanting to go down this avenue of coaching. And I think the skill set for the coach kind of overlaps between wanting to be there for the person, but it's also a difference in application, I guess, where professional coaching is on the person and not the problems, but leader coaching is the problems and the person, and you're trying to balance everything and help somebody down the road, and when you say cut your losses, it's not like you're writing this person off and that's it. It's more like, well, I've tried to coach you, I've tried to help you, and now there's this performance improvement plan, unfortunately, that we're going to have to go down, and I'm going to have to force this coaching.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, coaching is making sure that your folks understand the hows and the whys, right? And sometimes folks just don't want to do that. I hate to say it, but it's true.
yeah, I think about, and again, it just I'm really stuck on, man, that sounds so heartless, and I think that's the tough side of leadership that a lot of people don't see is after all this, when I said cutting losses, I truly meant that. I've spent a heavy amount of time and resource in this, and you got so far, and then we're just at that last hump, and being able to, I guess, move on is quite tough for me, and I guess something we just got to deal with as leaders, and just it's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
Yeah, I've actually had to coach some folks through that, because sometimes my PMs have to let some of their folks on their team go. And a lot of times I've had to coach through the anxiety that comes with having, oh, well, John is such a nice person. Okay, that's great. But let's separate the emotion from the tasks at hand. how are the tasks at hand being performed? Is this person a high performer, or are they performing to the point where they're causing rework or other things that are detrimental to your professional, you know, career path, whatever that may be. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think it's very important to understand that at the end of the day, there are key milestones and tasks at hand. As a coach, I'm going to be here to help you. I'm going to give you the tools that you need, but if you don't take the time to be disciplined enough to want to get better and want to do the right
Yeah.
thing, then yeah, I mean, cutting your losses is, that does sound harsh, but at the end of the day, if you don't want to be engaged enough to become that high performer or to want to be developed by, a leader or another peer, then what are you doing? What are you doing? Yeah.
Ernie, would you say it's harder to cut your losses in a union environment?
Yeah, it's almost impossible because, okay, so part of I guess, the challenge in a union environment is you can't just move on and go to a different person, and not that that's your goal,
Mm-hmm.
but if they are performing the job to standard, and I gotta say, like, standards aren't what they used to be. Certainly, I know every old timer is gonna say this. Not that I'm an old timer, but back in 2008 when I became a bus driver, this was, we couldn't do this. Like,
You
it's
don't even
just
have
different,
any. You
man.
don't
Like,
even have any gray in your beard, youngster.
oh man. But yeah, it's so sort of flipping the script a little bit from being the coach to being coached. I think when you reach a certain level, there is a tendency, no matter how much I say publicly and to myself, I got to learn, I got more to learn, got more to learn. How do we receive feedback? And maybe this is good for me. It will be good for me because that's why I'm asking the question. But maybe it'll be good for some of our audience who may be in a position of being coached. How do we screen through and filter the abundance of input that we get on an everyday basis of feedback, to where, like, I've heard one, I guess, critique of my management style uh over and over and over again, and it's one of those things where I'll just say it. I get a complaint come in about, let's call him John Flanagan, right? And his coworker Justin Fernandez, they're having a little bit of a right, and then they have a complaint about this person, and I go, John complains about Justin. I go to Justin, hey bud, we have to have this conversation, blah blah blah. I follow up with him. I can't then go back to John, especially if it's an HR issue, and say, hey, you know what? I wrote him up. We took care of him. I gave him a written reprimand, and he's not going to do that, right? I can't close the loop there, right? So one of the I guess criticisms that, or critiques that I've had over the years, like, oh, you just never close a loop in this situation, right? We tell management this, nothing gets done. Well, yeah, something did get done. I just can't tell you what got done, right? So how do I filter through feedback like that, saying, like, there's nothing I could say or do that's going to convince you that I followed through, but I followed through, right? How do I filter through that versus really meaningful feedback that I can learn and improve on, right? Because I think a lot of us, and maybe I just don't want to be alone on that. That's why I'm saying a lot of us, but maybe, I hear that, oh, we told management nothing gets done, and then everything's for me because I've already shut them off, right? I think that in situations like that, I think we can continue to be coachable to try and filter through these things and really hear the message in its entirety. Does that make sense? I feel like
Yeah. Well, so you just said that you can't close the loop, but you also said, I can't tell this guy, oh, it won't be an issue anymore. Why can't you just simply say it won't be an issue anymore without going into detail on what was done? You don't have to say there was any reprimand or anything else. Just let him know, hey, I took your complaint. It shouldn't be an issue anymore, or something. And that way he knows.
Right. I guess in a way I was more saying, like, I can't guarantee it won't be an issue
Well,
anymore,
true.
right? My standard line is, hey, I followed up accordingly. and again, to your point earlier, being in a union environment, if I step outside that, I followed up accordingly. Anything outside of that, then I'm opening myself up to a bunch of stuff I don't want to deal with.
That is correct.
Yeah, unions are tough. I will say in some of the clients that I have worked with over the years, we have had to have engagement with unions, and there's a fine line that you have to walk there. But what I will say, when it comes to there was one question that you asked, and we get it a lot. We call them broad brush stroke questions, like management isn't doing anything. That's your opportunity, I feel, as a coach to say, well, can you elaborate more? What are your
Ah,
concerns, right? Just to kind of, a lot of people just want to know that their voices are being heard when it comes to things like that. And at least in the hospital realm, Nurse Susie comes down and, "Rawr. Oh, well, what's wrong, Susie?" 5 minutes
yeah,
of venting and Susie's back to being a high performer. Sometimes people just want to know that voices are being heard, and actively listening as a coach is vital.
super. Well, and one thing before we move on, I have to add this little asterisk on this because a lot of my folks listen to this podcast. I am not anti-union. I I honestly believe this with all my heart. I've been blessed with one of the best union partners where I'm at currently. And I know, Ryan, you're looking at me like, of course you're saying that. No, I know. I'm just
No,
fucking around.
dude, I enjoyed
But
a union environment too. It made everything clean and easy because you knew exactly what you
yep.
were prescribed to. So,
Yeah, and I came up as a shop steward, so very much I'm pro union. I'm not. This isn't me against unions. It's just they're like everyone has agreed to. There is a whole different level of challenges that you gotta ensure you're meeting. Oh, and then while we're at it, while I'm on this little rabbit trail, I want to tell everyone out there who first goes into management as unions, read that contract. I cannot tell you how many people have come up to me and say, "Hey, Ernie, you're in a union environment. How do you deal with this?" And then my first question to them is say, "Well, that sounds like should be pretty spelled out in your CBA. That's pretty standard contract language. What's your contract say?" And they're, "Oh, never read it." Bruh. What are you doing?
well, you also want to make sure you know it because 99% of the time your drivers know it and
Yes.
will let you know.
Yeah. Sorry about that, Ryan. You can get us back on track.
No, you're good. I guess we can talk about kind of coaching traps or pitfalls to be aware of, such as trying not to coach when you're impatient, or coaching people who want answers and not growth, and they're impatient. It's like, just tell me what to do, or
Coaching
coaching
goes back
without
to
clear
teaching.
expectations.
Yeah, coaching, teaching, it's all kind of the same, right? We're not firefighters, right? We are here to make sure that we are empowering our people to ultimately become the problem solvers that we want them to be in their realm. And what I think when it comes to the pitfalls, well, that's a tough one. At the end of the day, I feel like when you're a leader and you're coaching, you have to be confident and you have to be consistent in your message every step of the way. Because again, it just kind of goes back to that accountability piece. Like, hey, this is the fifth time that we are covering this key topic. You teach me back what I just
Yes,
spent,
absolutely.
5 or 10 minutes coaching you on, right? All right, teach it back to me. Right. We in our realm, we focus on, again, I mentioned earlier, standard operating procedures, and we also focus on a lot of lean methodologies. I don't know for your audience, Tachi Ono, he is essentially the grandfather of lean thinking. One of his biggest things was, at the end of the day, we are teaching, but us as leaders, if we are not taking the time to do that self-reflection to understand, hey, I am doing the right thing and I am doing what I need to do to empower our folks to get better, that's super important. But if we are not, as leaders, doing that, we should probably hit the pause button because, again, the buck stops with us when it comes to developing our people.
And with the engaging questions in the coaching and everything that you were talking about before, it's also realizing that point where you're over coaching and letting people struggle. Like, you want them to grow and develop and come up with ideas, but you don't want to sit there and let people flounder while you're like, oh, well, tell me about that. Ask, and just continue to ask questions when people clearly are no longer progressing.
One of the
And I go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, as far as one of the pitfalls that if we're talking about that in coaching is understanding and really having your finger on the pulse of your department, and especially, there's the term, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and if we're not careful, we're constantly just focused on that. Meanwhile, we're leaving our high performers, because with a pitfall that I've fallen into is, oh, okay, this guy, he kicks ass every single day, 12 hours a day, blah, blah, blah. I could set it and forget it. I need to go focus over here. And to some extent that is true. I do need to do that because we need to bolster this part of our production up. However, be careful doing that because you're going to burn your good ones out, and not necessarily listening to their feedback, because you're like, you're a problem solver, figure it out, like, and you're never going to have that attitude towards them, but that's what they're going to hear if they say, well, I'm over here, you continue to do what you're doing because you're killing it. Okay. They're going to hear the figure it out. You know what I mean? So it's just, pitfalls to avoid is to really have your finger on the pulse of everybody in the department, not just the folks who require a little extra love and support. Even the ones who are your set it and forget it crowd, they still need that as well, because you're going to burn them out. And then all of a sudden when they're burnt out, man, you got a real mess on your hands.
So in addition
Yeah.
to the pitfalls, I guess what are some practical takeaways in relation to coaching in a leadership capacity?
Some key takeaways. I mean, that's a loaded question.
Well, just, some of the things you already mentioned, like having, asking better questions instead of offering solutions, up front, and just kind of, I guess, a recap of the key things that we've discussed along the way, or anything new that has come to mind that we haven't necessarily touched on.
Yeah. So I would say definitely asking the questions, asking the why. If you have to ask why 5 times, that's your job as coach. Ask the why, because again, we should never assume. We got to make sure we're all on the same page. But I don't know if other leaders or coaches, use this, but we call it the PDCA, so plan, do, check, act. So, as a coach, when you're coaching someone, it's important that you plan. And what I mean by that is you're aligning your expectations, right? And making sure that they know. And when I say do they have the support to execute what you want them to do, right? And then checking in on them, right? Following up. Hey, how did this week go? Did you get your barriers removed? Did you meet your targets? Did you meet your KPIs? And then you act, right? So if we have somebody who is a rock star, they're killing it, you adjust, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all about continuous improvement, but you adjust towards that person's strengths. But on the other side of that coin, you got to do it for the folks that are struggling as well, right? So again, at the end of the day, us as coaches, we're trying to get our people to be stellar, right? Continuous improvement. I said it earlier, but yeah, it's something that a lot of people just lose sight on, but you got to have that mindset every day, right? Because if you don't, things just you become complacent. You end up with, the folks that just do enough to get by. And that's not okay, right?
Yeah.
And that was plan, do, check, act. Okay. And
One
all
of
of
the
that sits on clarity, like you were talking about, right? So
Yep.
the key to all of it is how clear you are and how clear they are in receiving.
Yep. And it's one of the things, at least in supply chain, that we live by, because things are volatile, right? You have to have your pieces in line, and these 4 things have really helped the folks that are new and veterans at this point stay focused on the task at hand.
In closing, one of the key takeaways from our conversation today is something that I always have at the end of these episodes, when we come to this part of the episode, when we're kind of, narrowing down to the end and getting our key takeaways, for me, I just get yeah, no duh, dude. But it's super helpful to know that coaching is only going to help the entire organization. And selfishly enough, it's going to help you do your job too, right? Because in addition to leading, mentoring, coaching this team that I have, that I'm part of, I have a whole list of things that I got to do that I'm, boots on the ground for those senior management above me and senior leadership. So if I got to somehow do all of that in 8 hours, right, it's only going to be beneficial for me to give my team through coaching the tools to succeed. So the biggest takeaway for me is just in empowering people and boosting that team mentality, and knowing that we're all in this together, man, and it helps everybody if we're all lifting and doing our part. And the way that gets done is showing them how to do it and coaching them up to do that.
Well, and really accept that coaching takes longer. It's slower in the moment, but it's faster over time. And the more that you bring people along, the easier your job becomes, the easier their job becomes.
Yeah, it has that domino effect.
You know what? Also, we are a leadership podcast, and I wish we would have done it with John. But Alicia, what is the best piece of leadership advice you ever got?
It's all about coaching people and not providing tools. At the end of the day, it's about not commanding that you get this done. You gotta you gotta take a different approach. We're teachers at the end of the day. We are. And there are a lot of things that I've learned along the way. And one of the biggest things that really helped me when I got into this leadership role, and as I mentioned earlier, those daily huddles, right? Just what are our key targets? 5 minutes, right? What are our milestones for the week? What are our big tasks we want to get accomplished? What are our barriers? What are our risks, right? It kind of just sets up the stage for your path forward. And along the way, my leader, very hands-on as far as, hey, do you have everything that you need? Asking those questions just to make sure that I was empowered to make the right decision when it came time for me to make the right decision. And again, I think that just goes back to as a mentor and a coach, you have to build that confidence in the person that you're mentoring, because at the end of the day, you got to push them out of the nest and they got to fly.
Sooner or later.
Sooner or
Sink or
later,
swim, baby.
you got to go.
I'm a peacock.
So
you gotta let me fly.
That's right. So it's a beautiful thing when you see the development happen, but patience, discipline, consistency, and accountability, huge.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for joining us today. Really
Yes,
appreciate
very
it.
much.
If
it.
anything resonated with anybody, please subscribe, please like, please comment, whether you agree, disagree with stuff that we've talked about. If we missed something that, you find valuable, please comment on that as well. And just remember that leading ain't easy.
But you don't have to do it alone.
All right. Until next time.
That's right. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Leading Ain't Easy. If something in today's episode resonated, please do us a favor and share it with someone else who leads or aspires to lead. Because honestly, none of us have this figured out, but we can all get better together. If you're a leader or professional feeling quietly stuck in your career, visit reframerise.com. It's a career and leadership coaching firm where I work with veterans and other high achievers to realign their work and lead with purpose. Again, that's reframerise.com. And if you're looking for leadership tools, training, or support for your transportation department, check out Bus Pro Network, where Ernie helps school transportation leaders across California build safer, stronger teams. Please subscribe wherever you listen, leave a review, and let us know what topics you'd like us to tackle in the future. And remember, leading ain't easy, but you don't have to do it alone.